Imagine this: a love story that seemed picture perfect, a lavish Houston wedding on the horizon, and a couple living what looked like the American dream. But behind the smiles and designer clothes lurked a dark truth, a multi-million-dollar web of lies. This is the story of Darlington Akporugo and his wife, Jasmin Sood, whose romance extended far beyond their own relationship. For nearly 7 years, they preyed on vulnerable people, manipulating emotions and draining bank accounts. What followed was a federal investigation that shattered their empire and left dozens of victims heartbroken and penniless. Let's get into today's story. Darlington Akporugo wasn't your average Houston resident. At 47, this Nigerian national was a man of style: crisp suits, luxury cars, and an air of confidence. Alongside him was his wife, Jasmin Sood, who appeared every bit the partner in love and in life. On the surface, they were a well-to-do couple enjoying success. But prosecutors say that success wasn't built on business acumen, it was built on lies. Federal authorities later revealed that Akporugo and Sood were partners not only in marriage, but in a calculated criminal conspiracy. Their operation, run from Houston, but reaching across the U.S., specifically targeted the elderly and emotionally vulnerable. To friends and neighbors, they were charming, generous, and sociable. But to their victims, they would become the source of devastating financial and emotional loss. Together, they weren't just breaking hearts, they were breaking laws, systematically siphoning millions of dollars from unsuspecting people who believed in them. The irony? The lovebirds who made a fortune on romance scams would see their own love story play out in federal court, not in the fairy tale ending they had envisioned. The scam began around 2015. Using fake names and stolen photographs, Akporugo and Sood created convincing online personas, often posing as wealthy business owners, military officers, or professionals stationed abroad. They sought out their targets carefully, focusing on elderly individuals, many of them widowed or living alone. The approach was slow and calculated. Weeks or months of building trust, sending sweet messages, and crafting a believable romantic connection. Once the emotional bond was strong enough, the requests began. An urgent investment opportunity, an unexpected business crisis, or a medical emergency overseas. Every story was designed to tug at the victim's heart and loosen their wallet. Over time, victims were persuaded to send thousands, even hundreds of thousands, through wire transfers, checks, and sometimes physical gifts. The scam wasn't just about money, it was psychological warfare. Victims often believed they were helping a soulmate, not realizing they were being manipulated by a team of fraudsters working together. By 2022, the scheme had ballooned into a nationwide network of deception that would eventually collapse under the weight of its own greed. What made the Akporugo-Sood scam particularly dangerous was its sophistication. These weren't clumsy Nigerian prince emails. Each fake profile was tailored to the victim's background, using personal interests, religious beliefs, and even regional slang to build credibility. Once trust was secured, the tactics escalated. Victims were asked to help with short-term loans that would be repaid once a supposed inheritance or contract payment cleared. Others were persuaded to co-sign loans, open new lines of credit, or even buy luxury items like high-end cars, which Akporugo and Sood used themselves. One victim purchased a luxury vehicle in their name, believing it was an investment for their partner's business. The couple would move money quickly between accounts, sometimes involving other co-conspirators, to make the trail harder to follow. They also coached victims on how to explain large withdrawals to suspicious bank tellers, telling them to say the money was for home repairs or personal expenses. This wasn't a one-time con, it was a sustained, manipulative cycle. By the time victims realized the truth, the money was long gone, and in many cases, so was their trust in people. The full scope of the operation stunned investigators. Federal authorities documented more than 25 victims across the country, from California to New York. While each case varied in how much was stolen, the collective total surpassed $3,120,000. Some victims lost just a few $1,000s, while others lost their entire retirement savings. One particularly heartbreaking case involved a woman who wired over $400,000, convinced she was helping her fiancé secure a lucrative overseas contract. Another sold her home to invest in what she thought was a joint business venture with her online partner. For the victims, the loss wasn't purely financial. It often meant the collapse of their security and independence. For Akporugo and Sood, this was just the cost of doing business. They treated the funds as personal income, paying for expensive vacations, luxury shopping, and a high-end lifestyle in Houston. In court documents, prosecutors described the losses as catastrophic for some victims, noting that many would never recover financially or emotionally. Getting the money was one thing, hiding it was another. Akporugo and Sood operated like seasoned money launderers. Once a victim sent funds, the couple moved the money rapidly through multiple bank accounts, often in different names, to obscure its origin. Some transfers went through accounts controlled by friends or family members, while others were sent overseas. This layering of transactions made it difficult for law enforcement to trace the funds directly back to them. They also withdrew large sums in cash, used cashier's checks, and converted some funds into high-value goods, such as luxury watches and designer handbags. In certain cases, victims unknowingly became part of the laundering process, being asked to hold money temporarily before forwarding it on. Federal investigators pieced together the financial web using subpoenas, forensic accounting, and cooperation from banks. It was this paper trail, complex as it was, that eventually tied the stolen millions back to the Houston couple. By the time the FBI moved in, the couple's accounts had become a roadmap of fraud. One of the most sensational aspects of this case came from Nigerian and entertainment news outlets, which claimed Darlington Akporugo was arrested on or just before his wedding day in Houston. According to these reports, the timing was almost cinematic, a lavish ceremony interrupted by federal agents. However, U.S. court documents and official statements do not confirm this dramatic version of events. It's possible the arrest coincided with wedding plans or preparations, but in federal records, the arrest is presented without the romantic twist. Still, the rumor has persisted, partly because it fits the poetic irony of the story. A man who built a criminal empire on love stories, having his own marriage overshadowed by the law. Whether or not it happened exactly as the tabloids describe, the image of a groom-to-be in handcuffs has become part of the public's fascination with this case. Once in custody, Akporugo and Sood faced a barrage of federal charges. The centerpiece of the prosecution's case was conspiracy to commit wire fraud, and wire fraud itself, serious felonies that carry decades in prison. The charges stemmed from the use of interstate and international communications, emails, phone calls, wire transfers, to carry out the scam. Wire fraud laws are intentionally broad, allowing prosecutors to tackle schemes like this that cross state or national lines. The indictment painted a detailed picture: dozens of victims, calculated emotional manipulation, and a money trail that connected it all. Additional counts covered related financial crimes, though the main thrust was the wire fraud conspiracy. These charges were not just about punishing theft, they were about holding the couple accountable for the deliberate, long-term targeting of vulnerable individuals. The scale, planning, and cruelty involved elevated the case from a simple scam to a high-priority federal prosecution. Facing overwhelming evidence, the couple's legal strategy would soon shift from denial to damage control. By late 2024, the writing was on the wall. Facing a mountain of evidence, Jasmin Sood pleaded guilty in December 2024, admitting to her role in the conspiracy. 2 months later, in February 2025, Darlington Akporugo followed suit, entering his own guilty plea. The admissions were significant. Not only did they spare the victims a lengthy trial, but they also meant that the couple acknowledged the deliberate and coordinated nature of their crimes. Prosecutors emphasized that the pleas confirmed this was not a misunderstanding or a single lapse in judgment. It was a calculated scheme that ran for years. For Akporugo and Sood, the guilty pleas were likely part of a strategy to seek reduced sentences. For the victims, it was a bittersweet moment. Justice was being served, but the money they lost was unlikely to ever be fully recovered. The case then moved into the sentencing phase, where the true cost of the crimes, both financial and emotional, would be laid bare in a federal courtroom. On June 24, 2025, the courtroom was packed as the sentences were handed down. Judge and prosecutors alike described the scam as cold, calculated, and devastating in its impact. Akporugo received 188 months, just over 15.5 years, in federal prison. Sood was sentenced to 121 months, roughly 10 years. Both would serve 3 years of supervised release after prison. The court heard emotional statements from victims, some of whom spoke about losing their homes, retirement savings, and even their will to trust others. The lengthy sentences reflected not only the size of the financial losses, but the cruelty of exploiting loneliness and love. Prosecutors hailed the outcome as a warning to other would-be scammers that targeting vulnerable people carries severe consequences. In addition to prison time, the court ordered Akporugo and Sood to pay $3,123,073 in restitution. This figure represented the total documented losses from their scheme. While restitution orders are legally binding, in reality, victims rarely recover the full amount, especially when the defendants have spent the money or hidden assets. Still, the order served as a symbolic acknowledgement of the harm done. Prosecutors noted that financial penalties are an important part of deterrence, even if full repayment is unlikely. The restitution will follow the couple for years, as any income they earn after release could be subject to seizure to repay victims. For those affected, it's a small measure of justice, an official recognition that what was taken from them wasn't just money, but years of savings, security, and trust. The Darlington Akporugo case is a chilling reminder that not all love stories have happy endings. What started as carefully crafted online relationships ended in shattered lives and stolen futures. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment scam. It was a calculated, years-long operation that preyed on the most human of needs: companionship. For Akporugo and Sood, the price of greed was steep: long prison sentences, public shame, and a lifetime of restitution. For their victims, the road to healing will be longer still. Let's talk in the comments. What's your take on this case? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the notification bell. Till next time.